Hello everyone. So this is my first video log in about 3 months. And I'm just going to get the tears over with because it's just me, and any of you that know me or have come and heard me speak and heard me mention this have seen these, and I find if I just let them out, then I can move past them. But I need to do this, and I need to do it with you. So I haven't done a video log in about 3 months, and there's a reason for that, and it's because my mom passed away last September, and I really need to do a video log and just talk for a moment about the connection between self-reg and grief. So just as a backstory and to lighten it so that you don't feel too bad about me with tears here, my mom was 83, and she, people who take our courses have heard me tell lots of stories because self-reg is not just about kids, it's about adults, and it's about seniors. And trust me, I learned more about my own self-reg and hers, having your mother live with you, especially as she went into the caregiver age years. You know, she wasn't your typical blue-haired old lady. She had big red hair, and she'd wear her jeans, and you know, I sometimes forget her age. And she got quite sick last May, and I still thought she'd be around for a lot of years, and it just was one thing after another. And in what seemed like a shock, she passed away last September. But I want you to know that my mom would be pleased to know we're talking about her here today. When she was at the hospital, Stuart, I think I told you this, but Mom was at the hospital, and they told her, that she told the doctor, had told her there was kind of nothing more she could do. She was in ICU at that point, and she looked at him, and she said, "Under different circumstances, Doc, I think you were kind of cute." I mean, that was my mom cracking jokes,
Yeah.
right till the very end, I guess. And but the reason I want to do the video log, and I thought about whether this is too personal, and sometimes some things are, but this one I just feel the number of people that have come up to me during talks when I've mentioned this, and I can now usually do it without tears, or I'll tell a story related to it in some ways, because there's lots that it resonates with. I had no idea so many people were caregiving
Yeah.
for seniors and for their parents, and or had it really had been something that they'd carried through with them into their work. And I just thought, in this fall, see, I'm better now. I just had to get it out. In this fall, Stuart, as you know, because you've been supporting me in a bunch of ways, I'm pretty reflective. I'm pretty self-reg. I'm pretty good at doing the things that I need to do for myself. And at this stage in my life, but I started having all kinds of physical stuff
Interesting, eh?
that was different, and I tried to figure out, I just turned 50, so that's a piece of it. But I really think it had a physical piece around some of the grieving. So feeling hungry, you think it would be no, you look hungry more, and just feeling a little more blah. And it sort of had lingered on these last few months. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts around anything I just shared from the beginning to that little comment that it might go into a blog that I'm going to write about this topic, that this video will be a little piece of.
So, would you believe, because I won't make this up, but I knew exactly what you were going to talk about in this vlog. And also, just this morning, I was thinking about this very thing. I was thinking about you and Dot. And one of the things I was thinking was that you have been insanely busy the last 3 months. Like, when I tell people insanely busy, I can't even keep
You have
track
no
anymore.
idea.
Susan just
Yeah.
told me an hour ago that from here she's going on to Niagara Falls. That's what it's been like. It's
Yeah.
just I can't keep track anymore. But I was thinking this morning before you came how you've been so busy that you haven't really had that opportunity to grieve. And it's fascinating what you just said, because if we don't give ourselves not just moments, but even what you just did, it's fascinating how Fogel was right.
Yeah.
It does show up in the body.
It shows up in the body. And our culture, we mean well, but our culture is one of,
Yeah.
that there's this sort of certain expectation. I have a very good friend,
Yeah.
she was my yoga instructor. That's how I went. And then I went on to teach at her studio, who lost her son. And then she just had and her mom, and then within years. And, this is 5 years later, and she's still grieving. But it's struggle. If one of the biggest
Yes.
struggles that she has is that everybody, they mean well, but they want to say,
Yeah.
and I don't want to compare mine.
No, no, but
Is not to that extent at all. I can only imagine, but it is there and it is present, and yeah, and it bubbles up quickly, and
yeah. I had an experience this week, and I have to be careful how I describe it, but someone who has been in therapy for a while and incredibly resistant.
yeah,
And but you could see in the therapy notes
yeah,
that week by week he was edging towards something that had been hidden away.
yeah,
And so the breakthrough came this past week.
yeah,
And the reaction was extraordinary, lightning, a lightning of like, literally, he described how he felt like a heavy weight had been lifted off his shoulders. And I couldn't help but think, when I read all this, the self-control paradigm really sucks.
it truly does, and it's not very helpful.
No.
So I'm going to end it on one final story,
Yep.
and then we'll call it a day. So I want to, I'm always trying to share human stories of my less than perfect. I have many, apparently more than, I have all kinds, but it's helpful because then it helps us realize that
You know that Aaron is nodding his head now.
it's not just self-control. And if it was all self-control, I always say we'd be all, skinny and have run our, our marathons and, all of these things that we said we wanted to do, right? And so that's where understanding, I think self-reg is really important. And the more you learn it, the more it becomes part of your life, and the easier things get, to be honest with you, and the more human you feel. I don't know how else to say that. But it doesn't mean you're not going to have those red brain moments. So my mom was at in the hospital, and so I had taken her to Emerge that morning, and the Friday, and it was for her third or fourth time in Emerge. I expected her to be kept there again. She'd had, and
Yep.
had pneumonia, and then heart problems came out. And I spent the day there. She mostly slept, and I just kind of worked from the hospital. And then I went to go and get my daughter from school, pick her up from school, and to bring her back to the hospital. And when I did, we go back, and we've been moved to ICU, which was a shock that had never
Yeah.
happened before, and that
Yep.
it had been a bit of a shock. So you can imagine. Just think about. Like, we're going to do a 5-domain stress scan. Think about stressors in the biological domain, the emotion domain. I had barely eaten all day, and I had had way too much coffee and all these sorts of things. And then, worry. So you can just go through all the domains, cognitive, social, and prosocial. So you can imagine all those sort of stressors that are built up. So we go up to the ICU, and I go to press, the button that opens the door. And there's the hand sanitizer, which is everywhere in the hospitals, right? So there I go to take the hand sanitizer, and I do it fast, which is kind of how I do everything. And I go like this, and I said to Sienna, take some hand sanitizer. And we walk in to the front, of ICU, and there's the nicest man. He was there, like Mom was there in ICU for 5 days. And so he was so nice. Like, he would have been 80 something, and he was a volunteer, and and he was at the desk, and his idea was being a bit of a direction guard, and he says, you need to take some hand sanitizer. And I said to him, I did. And he said, no, you didn't. I've got it on video. And so the self-regger, and look, imagine what I do for a living. What did I say to him? I took the hand sanitizer. I did, right? I did. And if you think about it, that was a pro-social stress, because it was wrong, right? He was wrong. I'd done it so quickly. He was wrong. It was a sense of injustice in that particular moment, that on top of everything else was just one less thing I couldn't take in that moment. And what's fascinating is, so first of all, guess who got me out of it?
Sienna.
So kids can they do it for us, right? She said to the man, she's right behind me. She said she's had a really rough day, and he said, I know, sweetheart. and so I went in. I didn't say sorry in that moment. And I want you to hear that, especially when we're working with kids, right? We want them to say sorry. I didn't have sorry. I could have maybe been forced to say the words or guilted into, as adults, guilted into saying the words, but I was so worried about my mom. And
That's a great
so,
story.
so we walked down, you know, the hallway, and I came back a little bit later. Nobody told me to. I went back and said, I'm, you know, really sorry. It was just a rough moment. And, you know, it's a good example of, we're human, and again, self-reg to me helped. It didn't make me not have that moment. Made me understand what it was and what to do
That's
about
just
it,
awesome.
and how to see myself differently. So thank you for letting me unpack grieving and complexity, and I'll be using this to do a few blogs, a short series
Great.
on for
That's
others.
great.
Thanks.